From the CISO Series, it's cybersecurity headlines.
A look at the business impact of data breaches, US weighs TP link ban, and Beyond Trust suffers a cyber attack. These are some of the stories that my colleagues and I have selected from this past week's cybersecurity headlines. And much like a white elephant gift exchange, we're looking around what's on the table. We're trading stuff. We don't know the rules. We're all kind of mildly annoyed with each other, but we've chosen some stories for some insight, opinion, and expertise from our returning guest, Bethany De Lude, the CISO over at the Carlyle Group. Bethany, you had such a fun time over the summer. You decided to come back. Thank you so much for joining us. I got to ask, though, before we jump into the news, how was your week in cybersecurity?
I think my week, Rich, was just like every other CISO. We're thrilled to have budget behind us, having wrapped up our end-of-year conversations with boards and audit committees, and now we remain, tiptoeing on eggshells, hoping that bad actors remain on the nice and don't move to the naughty list as we head into the holidays and the new year.
The sad thing is, then you will be the one with coal in the stocking, though in that formulation. So, threat actors, think of Santa at this time of year, I guess is what I'll say. Someone who also has the holiday spirit is, of course, our sponsor for today, ThreatLocker, zero trust endpoint protection platform. And I see some of our jolly little elves in our chat room today. Of course, we have CCL, we have the big boss man, David Spark, and Max Tronic reporting in from the office. Thank you so much. We appreciate all of our commenters that are joining us today. I know the holidays are coming up. Time is valuable, so thank you one and all for making the time. If you want to join us live, you can go to the events page at CISOseries.com, look for the week in review image there, and you can click on it. You can join us, subscribe to the YouTube page. You'll find us each and every week. We want those opinions about the stories of the week in our chat, so I cannot wait to see what your thoughts are. And speaking of thoughts, just after a quick reminder that Bethany's opinions are her own. They're not necessarily those of her employer. Disclosures out of the way, promotions out of the way. We've got about 20 minutes, so let's jump into the news. First story here, Recorded Future highlights the business impact of data breaches. Russia's favorite tech industry news outlet, Recorded Future, has released a report from its Insikt group that's identified a 76% increase in publicly reported data breaches from 2022 to 2023. The group projects a further 5% increase for 2024. They pointed out the costliest impacts of data breaches in the last several years have been operational disruption, legal risks, and declining sales due to churn and loss of customer trust. They add the real risk lies in companies falling behind in their security strategy and failing to adopt a new way of thinking. So, Bethany, pretty substantial pairing: legal risks, declining sales, and loss of customer trust. You can't just cut a check to solve all of those. Maybe the legal stuff, maybe, but all the rest of those a lot trickier. At the same time, companies falling behind in their cybersecurity strategy, failing to adopt new ways of thinking, shouldn't they be doing more?
Yeah, well, first, I want to say to all my fellow CISOs out there, being a CISO is hard. And when I read that article, coupled with all the other ones that we read the data breach investigation report, the cost of a data breach, and so on. Yeah, the message, as well as in this article with Recorded Future, is that the threat landscape is increasingly complex and difficult. In addition, the environment that we need to secure is increasingly complex because there's so much that is out of our direct control. There used to be like the notion that we have a traditional boundary, with an edge that we can clearly focus on and secure. Well, that's not how modern businesses operate. So there's a lot of increasing reliance and partnership with third parties. Our information landscape really is identity. Like, that is your new perimeter. And anywhere that a corporate identity can log in, anywhere that our access is, where our data is resides, that's our new perimeter. And that's a real shift in how you go about securing an organization. So,
do these reports, when they come out, I mean, obviously everyone knows that there is a lot of costs that are associated with a data breach. Increasingly, everyone's dealing with them in some way, whether they're dealing with a third party, they're dealing with a breach themselves, data leaked from somebody else. Do reports like this help in terms of like providing almost like a market response, right, to this problem, right, of like, listen, you're going to lose customers because no one's going to be able to trust you that you can secure stuff. You're going to you're going to have legal costs that are going to go on for years. Does that help solve the second half of that problem, like kind of in a macro level?
Well, where these reports are really helpful is in telling the story.
Hmm.
So you can always have a great rip from the headline stories of the bad thing happening and having that quite adverse impact. And then you can use these reports to say, let me, this isn't a one off. This is something that is happening. It's happening more frequently. And here's how we're postured against that bad thing happening. So I think, reports like this are really helpful in bringing data to the story that you need your leadership to hear, and then your partners in the business to be able to really understand how cyber health affects business operations and avoid the many risks that we talked about. We didn't say cyber risk in any of these, right? We said
That's
regulatory
true.
risk,
That's true.
brand risk, financial risk, and I think that's key here. Use those terms, real data, and then contextualize for your business.
All right. Well, our next story here: Rhode Island and Connect On Call grapple with data breaches. So, two stories this week that highlight that the theft of what appears to be, I don't know, low priority data or things we've just become numb to. Really, we should be paying attention to. First, Rhode Island's RI Bridges system, managed by Deloitte, was hit by a ransomware attack likely tied to the Brain Cipher Gang. Great name, guys. Exposing sensitive data like social security numbers and banking details of residents applying for public assistance programs. Then, healthcare SaaS had to notify over 900,000 patients of a data breach in its telehealth subsidiary, Connect On Call, which also included health related data. So, Bethany, these types of stories tend to, I guess, fly under the radar because the number isn't crazy necessarily. Rhode Island, kind of a small state, and maybe people feel like there's not much to be gained from stealing a person's health records or maybe even social security numbers now at this point. In a way, this issue is sitting on the bench alongside infrastructure security, while people focus maybe on more high profile heights. Hey, you steal 50 million in crypto or something like that. I'm curious, what do you see as the dangers of these very common health data thefts that we're increasingly seeing targeted?
Yeah, well, there's been a really nasty twist to these stories over the past year. Going back to just pick, change healthcare, adding to these, which is access to healthcare has been disrupted. People couldn't get prescriptions; they can't do their telehealth visits, and so it's not just about um, potentially compromising and exposing leaking medical records. It's
Hmm.
about access to healthcare, and I think that's a shift, and that will get this more attention, or I hope it will get more attention. It's there's just truly no more honor among thieves. These thing causing performing an attack that could potentially cause loss of life used to be off the table. Well, now it's fair game, because you may get that incentivizes the response that the bad threat actors want. They want money. Um, Something that I also think gets missed in these stories is, in those records, there's a lot of personal information. It's not just a health diagnosis. So this is kind of the gateway to credential theft, identity theft, and I think you're going to see a lot of kind of like with Snowflake this year, where you had, I'll call it Snowflake adjacent breaches that were really because started with credential theft, and then there were getting into systems that didn't have the best cyber hygiene. Well, now you're giving threat actors the information that's needed to cause much more harm than I have your medical record.
Well, and I can just see, just with, hey, I got ChatGPT, I can throw all these in there and all of a sudden, generate some very targeted things
Yep.
very quickly at scale. That to me is kind of where I'm like, this is it, like you said, extraordinarily personal information that you can make some very tempting lures that would seem very real to a lot of people. I probably myself included. Like, I there is a lot of potential mayhem that could be caused. I want to give a quick reference to CCL here, saying, didn't Deloitte, weren't they breaching another incident this year? I do believe that they were with another kind of state or kind of government level system. Now this, I will also say Deloitte does a ton of these different systems. That doesn't, and I'm not saying that should excuse them from any responsibility or anything like that. I'm sure they're investigating it. They just have an enormous footprint when it comes to stuff like this. And then Maxtronic says, no clearinghouse for health data like there is for financial data. So that is a big problem too. I completely agree. Maxtronic, thank you for that. Next up here, Beyond Trust suffers cyber issue. Beyond Trust, a cybersecurity company specializing in privileged access management, not to be mistaken with the non-stick spray PAM, and secure remote access solutions, itself suffered a cyber attack on December 2nd. Its products are used by government agencies, tech firms, retail and e-commerce entities, healthcare organizations, energy and utility service providers, and the banking sector. I think we can just say by the economy at large. They determined that hackers gained access to a remote support SaaS API key that allowed them to reset passwords for local application accounts. It's not yet clear whether the threat actors were able to use the compromised remote support SaaS instance to breach downstream customers, although it certainly seems like a possibility. Bethany, anytime a security company gets victimized by threat actors, it's a very bad day for them, for their customers, and for everyone else who engages the services of any other security company. Kind of calls into question that chain of trust. I'm curious, what goes through your mind when you hear about this particular type of attack?
Yeah, well, I think this one specifically resonates with me, and identity, just that identity security is so just table stakes, in this environment. And to have a breach in what arguably are your most impactful identities if compromised, with any type of privileged access management solution, they are a great product. So it's always you're disappointed when something bad happens to good people. And yeah, interesting in reading this. There's still not a ton of information, but it looks like there were new vulnerabilities discovered, and that's led to this outcome. And that I think is going to be a theme that we see across 2025. Actually, I think there's going to be more 0 days, more exploits. In my crystal ball prediction, I thought for sure we were going to have another file transfer, big breach in 2025, and then I thought identity, something in identity management also. So that one's started a little sooner. It's good to get the sense that this one isn't as terrible as it could have been. Knock on wood, so far with what we've been told.
That's like the context to to put all of these kind of stories in. It doesn't appear as bad as it potentially could so far. I by the way, I'll double down on that prediction also as well. Some sage words from Bethany, our oracle here. Before we move on to our next story, I have to spend a few moments and thank our sponsor for today, ThreatLocker. Do 0-day exploits and supply chain attacks keep you up at night? Worry no more. You can harden your security with ThreatLocker. ThreatLocker helps you take a proactive, default deny approach to cybersecurity and provides a full audit of every action allowed or blocked for risk management and compliance. Onboarding and operation are fully supported by their US-based support team. To learn more about how ThreatLocker can help keep your organization running efficiently and protected from ransomware, visit threatlocker.com. All right, next up here, this was one of my favorite stories of the week, or favorites sounds most interesting stories of the week. U.S. weighs a TP-Link ban. Sources from the Wall Street Journal say that investigators at the U.S. Commerce, Defense, and Justice Departments have all opened separate investigations into the router maker TP-Link. The Defense Department is reportedly investigating national security vulnerabilities, and the Justice Department will look at if TP-Link price discrepancies violate antitrust laws for selling below cost. TP-Link accounts for roughly 65% of the U.S. home router market, in part due to their low prices. Back in October, Microsoft reported multiple Chinese threat actors were using a botnet made up almost entirely of TP-Link routers called Covert Network 1658 to compromise Azure accounts. So, Bethany, talk about hiding in plain sight, considering how many people use routers at home, which probably is close to saturation at this point. Appears to be quite an explosive story. What's your take on this?
Well, I'm really disappointed it didn't come out before the election, because I think anyone who ran on the platform of "and you get a secure router" would would have made my voting decision so much easier.
Whoever gives me Wi-Fi 7, a coupon for some Wi-Fi 7, that'd be great, right?
That would be terrific, and then a coupon that would at least normalize pricing on Amazon so that this router was no longer the top selling router. I think I couldn't help but reading the story, I had a flashback. There's that movie Leave the World Behind.
Okay.
And that is a little terrifying about what happens when really critical infrastructure and the technologies that we rely upon every day in our normal lives are controlled no longer by us, and for nefarious means. And this story is it art imitating reality? Is it reality imitating art? I don't know. Either way, I sense I'm going to be having a nightmare at some point this weekend. And yeah, it really is a head scratcher. We
Well,
already all the stories with like Salt Typhoon living in our in our telecom systems. I really don't want them living in my home.
Well, and it just makes me think, like, I'm just thinking all of a sudden now of like, oh, everyone that's been doing work from home, like, yes, I'm sure a lot of people are those on VPNs, but it's like, it's still the point, if there is a potential point of compromise at the router level, that's just like, it's so bad at so many levels. CCL in the chat says, not sure a ban will help. Is there any hardware product that does not have some relation to China and thus vulnerable to supply chain attacks? I do think in some ways this could be an instance of whack-a-mole, although you still have to like the mole is still there. You still have to hit the mole that's like popping its head out. Like if these, the investigations turn out, obviously they have to take some kind of action, but like, I mean, getting someone to upgrade their router already for like, just like, oh, it's out of service. Like, it's the firmware it's out of service, end of life or whatever like that. That alone is like is a tough hurdle. Getting someone to set up a router, I would say the average person, that's going to be a real, you're gonna have to push real hard, give a lot of carrots to make that happen. That market share, yeah, you could stop the supply, you could stop it now, but like, wow, talk about a long tail, right? That you have to worry about, right?
Yeah. We definitely you see things. So many of the remedies for these risks, you can't just pivot, overnight. You can't, because CCL's right. So many components are through my cell phone likely has
Oh, sure.
a component built in China. So, but I do think there's something to making it harder. you and like Huawei, you look at what happened when years ago, that was quite controversial when there
Hmm.
were you know feet were planted, and what's happening with TikTok today. It's clear it's not a linear thought process, but it is good to see consideration being given with how much we outsource, what we outsource, and therefore what we might want to start investing in differently from a national security and consumer perspective.
All right, well, our next story here gets right to my linguistics heart. Interpol kills off pig butchering. In recent years, the proliferation of online relationship and investment scams has made pig butchering a fairly common thing you'll hear on cybersecurity headlines. It derives from the idea that threat actors are metaphorically attempting to fatten up potential victims for a more significant return. If the love scheme goes very deep, then it's easier to extract money out of them for whatever reason. Now, Interpol is calling the cybersecurity community, media, and law enforcement to retire the term in favor of the more descriptive romance baiting. Europol said referring to the practice as pig butchering dehumanizes and shames victims. You are calling them a pig in that instance. And that romance baiting highlights the emotional manipulation in these schemes, with more emphasis put on the threat actors' tactics. This comes as part of a broader effort by Europol to encourage victims of these frauds to come forward to authorities. So, Bethany, is this an accurate and appropriate move, or simply attempting to soften the metaphor to avoid traumatizing or offending people? I mean, certainly that by itself, a worthy aim here. In other words, is Europol putting lipstick on a pig?
Ooh, that
I,
may have moved you to the naughty list. I mean,
oh
up until now,
no,
we had you on a very different list, but
no.
I have to say, I think language is important. And when you say pig butchering, it's not intuitive. I
Mhm.
mean, when you explain it, you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But I do think romance baiting, that is a bit more intuitive. And if anything that's done to kind of promote conversation, promote understanding, I support that. So if romance baiting puts the onus more squarely on the person who is victimizing rather than shaming the victim, because I wouldn't like to tell you that I was pig butchered.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But but it, if I was part of a romance baiting thing, well, that's an easier conversation.
Yeah, and CCL points out it's just a point of confusion, where romance scam or romance baiting or however we want to call it. Like we already know the lure, right? Like it's
Yeah.
easier to get into. I do think pig butchering started out probably as a law enforcement like shorthand or something like that. That went,
Yeah.
that then moved into the media as people were speaking to sources and stuff like that. So like I don't think it came from a place of malice, but like as an industry term, we can do better ways of communicating as these things unfortunately become more common and more seen at scale. So yeah, thank you for that, CCL. Completely agree with you, Bethany. A little bit of empathy goes a long way. It turns out, and again, doesn't change the dynamics of this, but maybe takes a little bit of the stigma off, and that alone was probably worth it. All right, and our last story of today, United Health's AI-driven insurance claim chatbot left exposed to the internet. The healthcare giant Optum has now restricted access to an internal AI chatbot that's been used by employees to inquire about how to handle patient health insurance claims and disputes according to standard operating procedures, or SOPs. This after a researcher from the cybersecurity firm SpiderSilk saw that its IP address was accessible online for anyone with a web browser. No password required, Phil Collins style. The chatbot did not appear to contain or produce sensitive personal or protected health information. Now, a spokesperson for Optum, whose parent company is United Health Group, told TechCrunch in a statement that Optum's SOP chatbot was a demo tool developed as a potential proof of concept, as many qualifications as possible there, but was never put into production, and the site is no longer accessible. Uh, Obviously, a very bad month for United Health Group, just from the data security side. Just looking at that, this exposed chatbot comes at the same time they've had a lawsuit from the Attorney General of Nebraska over data theft. Of course, it could be possible to accept Optum's statement that the SOP chatbot was a provisional demo for a potential proof of concept. But as we know, everything on the internet is connected to everything else in some way. It's just a matter of discoverability. I'm curious, what are your thoughts about the situation the United Health Group companies find themselves in?
Yeah. So so when I read this, for one, I thought, yes, we are getting an AI story into the headlines,
Yes, of
because
course we had to.
a
That
week
bingo
cannot go
card would not be
by
full. Yeah.
without that. And and part of this, there's what those of us, in the industry know, is that whether it was a demo or not, it was trained on data, and that training data could have been exposed through that chatbot, and we don't know exactly in their SOPs, what it is saying, or what additional, if they had a misconfiguration on the accessibility of a chatbot to the internet, what exactly was the data they used to train it? How protected was that data? Could the data have been pulled out using different prompts? So, not trivial. Hopefully this is one of those. You got a warning. Next time, heed that warning, so that the next time it isn't something a whole lot worse.
Yeah, and again, going back to potentially having health information or anything even associated with that is just a minefield. And in a way, to your point, I feel almost worse that it's a demo, because I have no confidence then that there were any kind of controls that were effective put in place, because this is still emerging technology. No one, this is not a perfected science for deploying these kind of things, even if you are going to go in production, let alone a demo which you only have in place so that you can improve it before production, right?
Oh yeah, and they said that they had, hundreds and hundreds of questions were asked of it, and all of the chats were stored. So, it certainly got more than trivial use,
Yeah.
as a demo.
We have a question in the chat. Can they be forced to report on the access and usage during that time period? I mean, certainly that transparency would be appreciated. I don't think anything in HIPAA or anything like that. I don't believe there would be any reason you would have to, given the optics. Might not be the worst idea in the world, but we can hope that it's a season of hope, is what I
Yes,
like to
it
say.
is the season of hope. You're
Yeah,
right.
so we can ping our hopes on a little transparency, and we have to be fully transparent. We are just about at the end of the show here. Before we get out of here, Bethany, was there any story that was a thumbs up or an eye roller, even either in a rundown or just kind of in the news of the week today?
Yeah, I'm going to actually pick an adjacent headline. Adjacent, that's my word for this podcast. I think this is my third time using it. But it has to do with Recorded Future. And Recorded Future being determined an undesirable organization in Russia. And I loved how their CEO responded with, "This was quite the rare compliment."
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just saying like thank you for yes, we take pride in this is kind of an amazing statement from a CEO.
Yeah, I had to. That one made me smile.
And thank you to our producer Steve for alluding to that in our first read. He is a master of copy. So some plaudits for producer Steve Prentice. Before we get after Bethany, where can people find you on the cyberspace if they are so inclined?
I am on LinkedIn, so head there, say hi, and I plan to stay there.
Okay, it seems like a good platform for
Mhm.
CISOs and for people that like to connect and engage and occasionally offer to sell me courses. So
There
not that
you
saying
go.
that you are,
There you go.
Bethany, but yeah, there you go. So we'll have a link to that in our show notes. Thank you so much, Bethany De Lude, the CISO over at the Carlyle Group. I really truly appreciate your time coming back. Two-time guest here in 2024. Getting close to the end of the year. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Rich, and wishing all the happiest of New Year's.
Absolutely. Same to you and yours. Thanks also to our sponsor, and a happy new year to our sponsor, ThreatLocker, zero trust endpoint protection platform. Thanks to our audience today. We can't always get every single comment up on the screen, but we deeply appreciate you being here, participating, helping make the show better. CCL, Maxtronic, the big boss man, David Spark, all in there. I know it's a busy time of year, and your time is valuable. So thank you for sharing it with us. Just a reminder, there will be no Super Cyber Friday next week, but do come back for another episode of the Week in Review starting at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. To register, just head on over to the events page at CISOseries.com. In the meantime, you can get your daily news fix through cybersecurity headlines. Every single day, we're taking Christmas off. Give us about 6 minutes. We'll get you all caught up. Until the next time we meet, I'm Rich Stroffolino, reminding you to have a super sparkly day.
Cybersecurity headlines are available every weekday. Head to CISOSeries.com for the full stories behind the headlines.